start recording. We're in some chats. 6 weeks. Yeah, that's true. It's always exciting. All right. My scenes here. No MATLAB scenes. Yes. Okay, so first thing, I just need to clear this up. I've been avoiding this because the syntax to do a formatted print is sort of weird, but you just memorize it, it'll be all right. Of course, the exam is open notes, open internet, open resource. It's closed collaborator is the term we're going to use. So you can use any static resource you can find, but don't post to a chat board or email or phone or anything like that. So don't worry if the syntax looks strange. Just make a note, know where to look it up, and you'll be all right. So if we have something like x equals 200, and say that's, well, let me say weight. Right, we can always do that, but maybe I want to have a program that actually displays something nice, like the object weighs 200 pounds. Like, how do I stick that into the sentence? The object weighs blank pounds. So far, we've only seen how to display static strings like disp. But now I have to know the amount of weight. Right, I can't, there's no way for me to stick in the variable here into this string. I'd have to type that ahead of time. Right, so how do I make what's called a dynamic string, something that changes based on a variable? So the way we're going to do that is with a function called fprintf. And you're going to say, why does it have two f's around it? It's a formatted print to a file. A lot of this will make more sense once we talk about C and some lower level concepts, but fine, it's fprintf. The first argument, it's going to be a function that takes two or more inputs, is going to be the string itself. So the thing weighs, and we'll have the same problem, like how do I stick a value in there, right? And the second will be the value we want to stick in, right? Now we need some syntax to tell MATLAB, hey, the variable over here, you know, this weight thing, we want that to be stuck where the underline is. So I guess you could imagine if you were making the MATLAB programming language that you would say 3 underlines in a row means substitute me in here. But you didn't make MATLAB, we're just learning how it is. So the way we do it is with a %sign and the letter D. Okay? We also, once we start using fprintf, we have to be very explicit in how we want to structure our lines. If I just press enter here, you'll see that my prompt is now right after the S. There's no new line. There's no enter, right? I'd like something called a carriage return. I'd like the line to drop down a little further. All right, so fprintf gives you total control of the display, and with great power comes great responsibility, right? We need to now actually handle moving that prompt down to the next line. And so the typical, and then, off the edge of the screen here. The way we're going to do that is by, of course I can't just hit enter here. If I put enter here, it doesn't actually put that character in the string. It actually drops me down a line. Right? So how do I tell MATLAB that I want it to essentially press enter for me to bring it down one more line? That's hard, right? Enter is something.
Backslash new or n?
Yeah, so if you've programmed it all, maybe you've come across this. These are non-printable characters, like things that we can't actually stick easily into a string. We'll have to use a different kind of syntax to represent them. So we'll actually do a combination of a / here. That's the funny one up by backspace. And then n to drop down to the next line. If you want to drop down 2 lines, you would use 2 of these, /n twice. You see? And now we get 2 new lines. There are other special characters like /t is for a tab. You can do fancier print commands. But what you need to know for the exam and just generally for your programs is this syntax here. Right? That we're going to use a %d to stick in a value. That's going to represent where we want the variable to be injected. And then, and I'm sorry, my big head is right in the way there, but there you go. And so the variable at the right here is going to be stuck right in at this point here. Okay?
Sir, could you do multiple %Ds and multiple
Mm.
variables in one fprintf?
Peter, I'm glad you asked that question because I was sitting here stroking my chin thinking, should I show them? Should I do this? And now, Peter, I have to. You forced my hand. So, yeah, what if you have two things? Like it weighs this much and it costs this much, right? So I have a weight and a cost just to make something up. So the syntax there, you're exactly right. You can have as many %Ds as you want. So, and so the thing doesn't get too unwieldy. Let me just change my format here. Weight is %D. LBS is, %D points. Okay? So now I need to give it two, variables to stick in, right? The function itself only takes in one parameter here. So how do I put both those variables into one thing? What's MATLAB's tool for putting a lot of variables like numbers into
Matrix?
Yeah, matrix. So in this case, just a vector, right? Just a list. So I can say weight, and then I don't know. You can also just put a number here, like 9. So if I had cost equals 9, and then I could put cost there. But this is tricky. This remembering to use these square brackets here to lump all of your variables is important. If you don't do that, printf will think that the third parameter is yet another thing, and we could talk about it if we wanted to, but we don't. So put the brackets around all those together to lump them in, and then make sure you have as many %Ds as you have variables. Okay? All right, we'll talk more about printf when we get to C, and there are other things besides D. You could do a %F and %C. So there's a lot more to printf because, before graphics, all computers were just text-based. And so people have entire user interfaces built with, interesting characters and using tabs and all that stuff. So fprintf is kind of historic in that regard. We don't use it a whole lot now, but it is useful. Okay? All right, so remember that down and just file that away. And that allows you to do formatted printing. Questions? Okay. No questions. There are never questions. Fine. It's okay. No, still no questions. All right. On we go. Let me put my little self down here. So, let's get to this game. First of all, always good, make sure it runs. Press run. If your thing collapses under its own weight, let me know. It's looking good. Faster and faster. Ah! Okay, this is awesome. All right, once you're thoroughly, stressed by the speed that your game's running, you can do it and stop it. So, today is the day we're going to start controlling our ship. Our ship has been standing by idle for far too long. Let's get that ship under our control, okay? We're going to use the keyboard arrow keys. You have the directional arrow keys to move this thing around first in just X, and then I'll let you expand it to it can be X and Y. Okay? And asteroids, we don't really let the ship go in Y, but, why not? We can do what we want. So, I realize I haven't posted this thing yet. You need a file here, a keyboard emulator. So let me post this on the Google Classroom, and you'll download it and grab it this way. So give me a moment here to post this. Let's see, sharing. Okay, so you should get a notice that you can access this new file like in your email. I'll also post a link to it in the chat. There's a glitch with Google Classroom where you can't download files easily, so I'm not even going to try it. So let me just chat this out here. You should get that link. And I want you to put it in your folder along with the other pieces, the move X by, move Y by, right? Keyboard emulator, all those pieces. Make sure that's visible there. So I'll give you a moment to get that all squared away. Can everybody access that file?
So where do we go to access the file?
I put a link in the chat, and also you should get an email saying a file's been shared with you.
Okay.
So either way. All right. Okay, I just want to check a couple things here. Anybody not able to get it? Let me know. We got it? Okay. So I am not going to discuss the syntax in this file. If you're super into MATLAB and later on you want to learn how to write code like this, let me know and we can talk. This is beyond what I expect you to be able to do, but it's useful because typically you're in the classroom and actually we'll give you game controllers and we'll talk in detail about how to read data over the USB and you learn how to interact with these pieces of hardware. But we don't have that hardware now. So in order for you to be able to play the game still, this is a way for you to read the keyboard. Once we're back in person, we'll rewind and talk about how bits get transferred between bits of hardware. But this is just something to fill the gap. Okay? So the keyboard emulator here is going to, hopefully you've all played video games in the last, 5 or 6 years. Game joysticks tend to have two, toggles, right? A left and right joystick, and then a bunch of buttons. So this emulator only emulates one of those two joysticks, but it allows you to access all the buttons as well. So keep that in mind as we talk about how to use this thing. All right, so up at the top, we've got some pieces here that set up our game world. Okay, we have CLF, XLM, YLM, grid on, hold on.
Professor, sorry. Does this stuff need the keyboard emulator need to be in the EW200 game folder?
Yes.
How do you do that? Sorry.
Several ways. It's just that this folder is somewhere on your computer, right? So you can use Windows Explorer to just Control C and Control V it. If you download it into downloads file, you can actually drag it and drop it onto this current folder pane in MATLAB, and that will also copy it.
Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, but it is important that all of these files are in the same folder. Okay, so all of these pieces here are setting up our world. We use line 1 here to say clear the figure, CLF, to erase the previous game. But we're being a little cavalier here and saying you could have several plots open at once, right? And MATLAB has this idea of what's the current figure, and that's the one you clicked on last. But we can also be explicit and request to use a certain figure. Let me just show you what I mean. If down in the command window here, you can say figure, and you just get a new window that pops up, and it says figure 2, right? And you can type the word figure again, and you get figure 3 and figure 4, and all these will be named by a number. And if I click run, all of a sudden my game is going to be running in whatever figure I clicked on last. You see now it's running in figure 2? So I want to put in my game that I want to use figure 1. I'm going to say fig equals figure parentheses 1. And the reason I'm doing this is because that gives me a handle, a little hook that I can then say, hey, I want to listen to any key that's been pressed while this window is active, right? When I have Microsoft Word open and I've clicked on Microsoft Word, the keys that I type get sent to Microsoft Word, and then when I am typing in the chat, the keys that I type get sent to Zoom, and Microsoft Word doesn't see any key press, right? So I want to do the same thing here. When I'm typing and my game is active, I want to request to learn about those keyboard presses. The details of how you tell the operating system you're interested in keyboard presses beyond our scope. But we're going to need this hook in order to build a keyboard emulator. So now that we have this fig thing, I'm going to go ahead and skip down a little bit here below all the other setups. And eventually we'll put this in its own function called build world, just so that it cleans up our file here. But I'm going to get a keyboard object by saying keyboard equals keyboard emulator. Make sure you do this camel case, the capital E for emulator, parentheses, and I'm going to give it the window. See that fig? That matches. That way the keyboard is listening to events that are pressed while that game figure is active. Okay? How are we doing? All right. So this keyboard here coming in, then in my loop or anywhere else in my game, I can be notified or figure out the state of the joysticks. Okay. Now, since I only have buttons here and I don't actually have ability to, a joystick is analog in a sense, right? I can go up really hard or just a little bit, right? And so I'm kind of exposing you to a bit of pieces that will only really make sense once we have hardware. But the way the joystick tells you its position is kind of funny. It gives you a number between 0, that means you're all the way on one side, like hard left, and 1,024 means you're hard right. Where do these numbers come from? We'll talk about that some other time. The same reason colors are specified between 0 and 255. But fine. Accept it as is. Hard left, 0. Hard right, 1,024. That means the middle, when no one's touching the joystick, it's going to read what?
$512.
Bam, right? That's another magic number. Okay? So that's funny, but this allows the keyboard to look more like a joystick to the game. And I don't have the ability to go a little bit left or a little bit right. So when you press a key, you're going to go hard left. It's going to be, the joystick's going to read 0. And when you don't press anything, it's going to read 512. And when you press right, it's going to be all the way 1024. So we're kind of, mapping the joystick to just these buttons. I think that's everything I need to tell you here. Let's see what it looks like. This is my game loop, right? While 1. Let's just print out the joystick X position every time through the loop. Now we're doing this how many times a second? It depends what DT is, right? DT for me is 10 frames a second. Just say keyboard dot JLX and don't put a semicolon, and that will display the left joystick's X value. You understand? If I put a semicolon there, I just wouldn't see any output. I could also use my clever fprintf that I now know about to say the joystick's X position is such and such. And right now we just see a bunch of 512s. Right? I'm not pressing anything. When I press the left key, though, do you see what happens? I get a bunch of zeros. When I press the right key, what do I get? A bunch of 1024s. What do you think? Okay? That's how we read the joystick. Let's just make sure Y works. We'll say JLY instead of JLX. And there is no JRX or JRY. That would be the right joystick. And I just don't have that many arrow keys on the keyboard, so oh well. But once you do have a real gamepad, you could actually use two joysticks at once. So now I'm doing JLY. Again, it's 512, but now the left and right arrow keys don't do anything, but the up and down arrow keys, if you're highlighted in your game window, make sure you click on the game window so that that is blue. Then you should be able to get between 0 and 1024. Can everybody see this? All right, so that's really, now we're done, right? You can use this information maybe in an if clause to move your ship. If the thing is greater than 512, move the ship to the right. Otherwise, keep the ship, if it's 512 exactly, don't move. Otherwise, right? So that's all we can talk about. We could just turn off the lecture and send you loose, right? Good?
Sir.
Go ahead.
Ultimately, are we trying to design an asteroid dodging game, or will we be making kind of our own variant of it?
So we're going to go all the way through with this because you put me on this path, you remember. We'll make asteroids together, and then I'll say, all right, it's your turn. Right? You can use all this code. I would encourage you to not use a whole lot in the game.m file, but certainly all of the functions. But then you make your own thing. You say, hey, I'm making Frogger, and I'm making, Flappy Bird, right? And whatever you want. Yeah? If you want to do asteroids, you'll have to show me that yours is significantly different than my asteroids, or our asteroids, I guess. But you will have total creative freedom. Right? So I want you kind of thinking about that as we go through. In the back of your head, like hey, he's talking about rotating asteroids, but I could think about spinning a gun turret, Sound good? All right, great. So I was being a little facetious, I guess, or a little, silly, saying that I could just turn you loose. I do want to show you sort of how to use this and what a good loop structure looks like. But my point here is that besides the fill command, right, in this .x data, .y data, and besides this weird keyboard object, it's still programming, right? It's still algorithms. You have access to a few different library calls that maybe you didn't know about, but it's still if statements, it's still for loops, it's still while loops, right? There's nothing new to making a game that isn't that is fundamentally different than writing another kind of program, like sorting a list. Okay, so we're using the game as a vehicle to sort of motivate you and to make it, feel more real. But these tools that you're learning here are applicable to absolutely any kind of programming problem you approach. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and stop this game. And started talking about how to move the ship around. We already have the move by functions, which is really what we want here. You can hit Control-C at the when you're in the command window here, and that will stop the game. You can also click back in the editor here, and then you'll get the stop button. So either way you want to stop the game is fine. Okay. For now, I'm just going to keep my rock speeds constant so the game doesn't get unplayable but we can certainly bring that back in whenever we want to. Yeah. So let's look at the structure. This is my while one. This is my main loop. Every time I draw a frame, remember this is like a flip book, okay? I want to do a few things. I want to update the bad guys. I want to update the good guy or gal. And then I want to check for game terminating conditions. So far, my loop only has that first item, update the bad folk. Right? For length and lengths, move these things, check if they're off the screen. Right? This is the bad folk. Let's add the hero. The hero, unless their key is pressed, there's no need to move the hero. Let's just handle horizontal translation. Let's not move our ship up or down. Let's just move it left or right. Okay, so this first clause here, 32 down to 46, is all moving the rocks around. Step 2, move ship around. Okay? And so what should I do for the ship? I should have an if statement asking whether I should move it at all, right? So, Jameson, what kind of values are we looking for in JLX that will tell us to move the ship?
Yeah, 0 and 1024.
Yeah, so if keyboard dot JLX is less than, now let's keep it less than so that when you do use a joystick, you know, we're keeping the idea that it could be any value, not necessarily 0. So yeah, you could say, is it double equals to 0? And that would work just as well here. But let's keep it less than 512. Then move x by. You see how nice these functions are now? We don't have to remember about x data and, oh my god, the vectors and stuff. Move x by. What's the thing I want to move? Not a rock, but what? Justin.
Ship.
A ship. Good. Okay. And how much do I want to move it? Now, you're going to sit here and go, I have no idea how much I want to move it. Maybe 4? You know? The minute you sit there and think to yourself, I'm just making up numbers, then stop and think, you know, I'm simulating a world here, right? I don't know how much I want to move the ship. I know how fast a ship can move. Maybe the ship should be able to move across the whole screen and it takes 2 seconds to do that. Okay, that's something I can think about. Like, you know, the player should be able to dodge the asteroids. How fast should it be able to move? If you say that that's the case, then its speed and units per second, meters per second, should be 7.5. Just like we have rock speed up at the top here, ship speed should be defined in meaningful units. Right? We should be able to, you know, move across playing area in 2 seconds. Okay? That by defining a speed here rather than putting a particular number at the bottom here allows me to independently change my frame rate and, you know, apart from my game dynamics. And I really want to make sure that that point is clear. I want, because eventually you're going to show me your game has like 400 rocks and it's going to not work. And we're like, oh, okay, we need to lower our frame rate. And if we lower the frame rate, I don't want the rest of your game to all of a sudden collapse. Okay, so keep it in terms of these physics ideas. And we say ship speed, so that's in units per second. I need to multiply by something with the units of seconds. What do I have in here that tells me how many seconds have elapsed between ship movements?
DT.
DT, perfect. Okay, now I want to move it, if it's less than 512, I want to move it to the left, and that would be a negative translation. Right? I could say else if keyboard.jlx is, what's the other condition that I want to do a movement? Zach, what do you think?
Pretty.
Yeah. greater than 512. Easy day, right? And then it's the same story. I mean, unless you wanted to have some weird dynamics where it can move right faster than it can move left or something odd, but we just remove the -1. Right? So the nice thing about our structure, I mean, yeah, we did a lot of work up front, but now we can add layers of complexity kind of modularly, right? We didn't go through and change the rock code. We don't have a bunch of random magic numbers floating around. I mean, besides perhaps 512, but you'll grow to love that number.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I know in some, it probably doesn't, or it doesn't matter for this with the keyboard, but say we were using a controller and it's on a spring.
Yep.
And so when you come back to the center, it springs in the opposite direction a little bit.
Yeah.
It sends it. So say you wanted to have it from, would you just change, if you wanted it to be less sensitive, would you just up that 512 number or lower that 512 number by?
Yeah.
I guess I answered my own question there.
And perfect, right? Talking it out. So we would call that like a dead zone, right? There's an area of the joystick where we just think it's within the jitter of the spring. And in fact, if you play with the joystick for a while, it might not actually come back to 512 every time. It might, when you release it, it might have a bit of slop and only go to 508. Right? And we certainly don't want the player to slowly move off the screen as you eat your Cheetos, which is how I play. So and there's a lot, and you're just I really want to tell you more, but dealing with hardware is complicated, right? Even when you press the buttons, I'll tell you just this one thing: when you press a button, it turns out you don't just press it. When you're mad like me, right? You press it hard, that actually the copper will actually resonate and ring, and so what it actually looks like is maybe a dozen button presses all at once. Which maybe is fine when you're shooting the gun in the game, but when I'm pressing letters on my keyboard to type to you, I don't want to see 5 J's, even though electrically I did tap it 5 times, so that's called debouncing. And there's a lot that goes into building reliable hardware like that. But enough of that. So anyway, I think hopefully you should feel pretty excited that to move the ship only took me, 5 lines of code. And let's actually make sure it moves. Oh, right now it's really a game. It's actually a game. Well, it's almost a game. Maybe can we do a little bit of collision detection here, just so that you can walk away and play this with your friends? Because I know that's what you do after a game.
So could I see the ship speed function up above?
It's not a function. It's just a number, right?
Yeah, because now I remember, because we said this was like.
Okay, yeah, I missed that earlier, I think.
And if you decide that the ship should maybe get a bonus, right? Like, then somewhere else when it collides with the bonus shape, you just make ship speed double, right? Or it hits some kind of penalty problem and the ship speed lowers. And so by keeping this as a variable rather than a constant, we can actually make the game a little more interesting. Like every time you get hit, you slow down a little bit. I don't know. So you can imagine these game dynamics. But this is it. That's an interactive game now. The last piece, and let's get rid of this print down here. The last piece would be check for special conditions. And there might be a lot of conditions here. There might be you hit a power up, or the user has a button press that indicates they're shooting a weapon, or whatever, right? The only condition we need to worry about is, did you hit a rock? Because after I've moved all my objects, right, now is when I want to check for new collisions.
Sir?
Yeah.
Whenever I try to run it with try to move the thing, it says, warning, setting the key press function property is not permitted while this mode is active, and then it lists a bunch of errors.
Make sure that you've got the focus on the game. You see how when I'm over here and the blue highlight is in the editor? Make sure the blue highlight is in the MATLAB figure.
Okay.
And then you should be able to see it. The other thing you want to make sure is that you've actually set up the keyboard emulator and associated with a figure. So keyboard emulator parentheses fig here. Make sure that you get this new piece of code at line 1 here and line 7 are the new pieces of code that we hooked in. Okay. So I don't know if we'll get to do this yet, but my favorite way to write code is to just have some positivity, right? Some wishful thinking. Let's move my face. Wouldn't it be great if I said the following? For rock equals rocks. Remember, I want to go through all my rocks now and check if they hit the ship. So this is one way to write a for loop, sure, right? Here I went through I because I needed to update the speed of the rocks. But here I can just use a simpler form. I say if is collision between my rock and my ship, right? Display game over. Something like that. That should work. I want that to work. Okay? It doesn't work because this collision doesn't mean anything, but that could be a function. I could write that function, right? And I can encapsulate all the messiness of figuring out whether these two polygons overlap in space inside of this is collision function, and then I could read this. Kind of for every rock, check whether it collided with the ship, and if it did, display my message, game over. Okay? Now, that's nice and good. That's just going to quickly get lost in the command window, and the player can still play as long as they like. I actually want to end the game. So I'm going to give myself a new variable here, is alive equals 1, and rather than while is alive, right? And then I can figure out right? You see, so in line 30 here, I'm adding this little flag, which is initially true, so I go ahead into my loop, but now here, I simply set is alive to what? Daniel, what do you think?
Anything other than 1.
Yeah, okay, so, well, really we need to put it to 0. It turns out that MATLAB interprets any value besides 0 as true. Fine. But yeah, so is alive here, that's 0. Now, to be more explicit, I think it would be nice to say, while is alive is greater than 0, and then maybe you give the player a bunch of lives, right? You could put 5 here and subtract from it. I don't know. There's a lot of game dynamics you could throw in here, right? Or we could say, well, it's not equal to 0, I guess. Did we go over this? This tilde equals? That's how you say not equals. I think MATLAB on-ramp hopefully had this. Some of the stuff I sort of brushed under the rug while we were moving forward. Okay, so there we go. Is live, but I need to do this. I don't know that I want to do it in 5 minutes. So let me just wait until Wednesday to write this function. But you see why it'd be nice to have a function here. We'll find that we have to use a mapping toolbox kit, and we have to find polygon intersections, and it's sort of a hassle. We want to wrap that all into a box and never look at it again. Maybe on the weekends we can look at it. But we don't want to have to deal with all that math when we're going through our main loop. I want my main loop to read like a book. I want to move the rocks around. Any of them off the screen? Sure. Put them back on top. Good. Move the ship around. Did anybody hit each other? Good. Right? See how nice that is? I mean, maybe it's not exactly like reading, the latest, thriller, but it should read in a certain manner of speaking, right? Things like, let me pause and stop this thing. Things like x.objectData minus mean object data, right? That's messy, right? If somebody comes in and is really interested in our game, like for whatever reason, then we can say, oh, let me tell you about movex2. This is a clever little guy. Or gallery. This is a two-step process, right? But don't get me all confused in game.m while I'm just trying to understand your game dynamics. Okay? Does anybody have problems running this code so far? I mean, if you haven't typed it, then I guess fine. But if you've typed it and you're having problems, let's spend the last few minutes here just to make sure I can address you.
Sir,
Sir.
when I
Go ahead.
oh, thanks. When I run it, it just keeps running 512, and whenever I push the arrows, it doesn't change anything.
Make sure that you have the highlight in the game window here. So
Yeah, I did.
it says Fig 1 like this.
Yeah.
Then I can look at your screen. The other things to check are to make sure that it is Figure 1 up there, that it does say Figure 1 and doesn't say Figure 3, or you didn't dock some other figure. And that matches line 1 of your code, that you're listening to keyboard presses while Figure 1 is highlighted. And then,
I think that's all correct.
okay. Well, hang in there. I'll have to look at your screen to figure that one out.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Was there another person that jumped on?
Yes, sir. I'm just getting an error message that says there's an error in my line that says keyboard equals keyboard emulator fig.
All right, make sure that the keyboard emulator, that file is in the same folder as everything else. Okay. And that is your current folder, and you have exactly this view. That game.m and keyboard emulator.m are right next to each other. All right.
All right. Yes, sir.
Does that help you, or is that okay? Hopefully so.
They're not right next to each other, but everything else is the same.
Well, they don't. I mean, it depends on alphabetical order, but
yeah, but everything else it looks like it's the same to me.
okay. Well, let me. Anybody else? Both of these, I need to peer at a little more. But is there anybody? Just these two? Okay. I don't believe it, but I'll let you go.
Doctor, I've been curious. What kind of games do you play that you mash the buttons to the point that the copper?
I mash the buttons when I'm mad at my computer usually. No, you should have seen me just last night. And then I'll stop. But had this great pre-recorded lecture, and I have this high def audio set up here, and it didn't. My whole audio system broke without telling me. So I had 30 minutes of lecture, and you should have seen what happened to this poor keyboard at the end of that session. So.
That's rough, sir.
I know, but no, I pit around Minecraft and dig up dirt with my son. I'm a dirt digger. I've got a good shovel. All right, good stuff. Let me let you all go. If you have questions, stick around, and so Michael and Connor, anybody else, welcome to stay. But otherwise, have a good night. Your homework is to make sure this works, so that on Wednesday you come with your questions and we can drive forward. Okay? Good. All right, Mike, why don't you share your screen? Let me turn that on. I think the capability is disabled right now. So, yeah. Try now.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, sir.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Sir, can you see that?
Yeah. Okay, good. What are you doing here? Let me minimize this. Okay, keyboard emulator.m, game.m. Oh, okay. So of course you have the is collision thing. You just got to remove that.
Yeah, I just
okay.
percented the thing out, commented it out.
Yeah. And scroll to the top of your fig equals figure 1. All right, so go ahead and play. Okay, and now press a key.
I am. It's not doing anything.
Put a breakpoint at line 49 there. Sorry, just click on the margin. You see the little horizontal dash? Now it's at line 50.
Oh.
All those little horizontal black ticks there. Click that. Now it turns into a little stop sign. And then click run again, click play. Yeah. And, okay, good. So this is all working. And then you can type keyboard.jlx in the command window down there. Yeah. Enter. Good. Okay. So go ahead and remove that. Click on that stop sign again to remove it, and click on line 51 right below it. Okay. So now go ahead and hit quit debugging at the top there, and play it again. Okay, and then press the left and right arrow keys. Okay. Yeah, let me check. I wonder if you're in 2020A. That should be what I have as well. Make sure.
What's that?
Yeah, okay. I will check. Not permanent mode is active. I'll just have to Google around for that one. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and switch over to Connor there.
There you go. So this stuff is all like commented out right now, but
Sure. Okay. Okay. So give me put a semicolon line 10 just for my peace of mind.
this. Oh, yeah.
And then now scroll up. Okay, so line 1 there. You see line 1, you said figure equals figure. See, that's the problem because figure is a function and it's very powerful and someone spent a lot of time writing it. And now you've created a variable with that same name and essentially crushed it. Right? So we got to be very careful and use the word fig instead of figure. Right? And now say clear all. Because look down at the workspace there. Your figure, that one of a function, is now just a 1x1 figure thing. So say clear space all.
Right here.
Yeah, and then your workspace should get cleaned up. And now play. Go ahead and click play.
It's even playable.
Yeah, hey, even better. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Very cool. And I like your pastel. It reminds me of sherbet. It looks tasty.
Thank you, sir. I still have the color thing to figure out because I think the game, and then it ends right there. But
Yeah, sure.
I can figure that out later.
Okay. Great.
That's just this little piece I need to work on.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we got one down. Who's next? Ben?
No, sir. I just had the same problem as Michael. And I was trying to
With
see if we could
that
figure
mode
it
being
out.
active.
You want me to share my screen?
Yeah, sure. Just in case it gives me some clever insight. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Can you see my screen?
Why don't you do the same thing? Just say clear all, just in case you got something a variable defined that I don't see here. So yeah. And then go ahead and close that figure. Close figure 1. Just click X on figure 1. Yeah. Okay. Now you should kind of start from scratch here. So yeah, click there. Yeah, play.
It's sharing over here.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay,
Great.
now I can play it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So maybe you had a variable defined or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Cool.
You want to try that, Michael?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I'll try that.
I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed here to hope that solves your problem.
Oh, it's working now, sir.
Oh, very good, very good. That makes me happy. All right, well, enjoy playing your, easy to win game.
Thank you, sir.
All right, have a good one.
You too.